Uh, Good evening and welcome to the Gnostic Rebellion. Uh, Roland Johann Gersbach is a congregant of the Gnostic Church of Light, and Roland's been a producer of thoughts and ideas and demonstrates an important key to gnosis. Okay, so we're going to introduce him in a moment, but before, if you would, in the description to this video, you'll find a donate link that not only supports this program, but the work of maintaining our historic building and congregation. We're the first fully owned and operating Gnostic church on the continents of the Americas, and your donations are tax deductible. While you do that, I'll extend this blessing. May wisdom and divine providence increase the unique genius of our congregation and bring us to health, wealth, and increase of days. Wonderful. Okay. Now, before we begin, I'd like to state that we've in attempting to turn a lemon into lemonade, we got stood up in last night's recording session with someone who seemed like an interesting guest. So I decided to take this opportunity to show the depth of our program, the Gnostic Rebellion, and how this enhances the depth of gnosis by showing the individual genius of our congregations and our guests. Roland, welcome to the Gnostic Rebellion. How are you?
Thank you. I'm good. How are you?
Okay, great. I'd love it if you could tell us a little bit about yourself and your spiritual journey.
Well, as you know, my name's Roland. I've been interested in Thelema since I was a teenager. I live in Asia. I teach English in Thailand. I've I first became interested in Thelema and Aleister Crowley when I was 16, and this was through a friend of mine who introduced me to his work. Prior to that, I was interested in Buddhism and Hinduism and Taoism and Chinese philosophy. And when I saw Crowley's work, I realized that he's more in line with Oriental thought than he is with Satanism, which was the interest that my friend had in magic. And that was my introduction to Crowley when I was about 16, 17 years old. Then I read the Book of the Law. I got interested in theosophy in my early 20s through another friend who introduced me to the works of Krishnamurti and Madame Blavatsky and Rudolf Steiner. So by the time I was 23, I had read things on theosophy and Thelema, and I was also practicing magic at the time and yoga. And a few years after that, I joined the OTO. I was initiated into the OTO. And then I became disillusioned with the OTO and the way that it's run by a bunch of people that really don't have any real interest in magic, and they're not very serious about magic. I left the OTO. I carried on until I became acquainted with you and the Gnostic Church of Luke's. I joined the AA, and now I'm a congregant of the church. So my practice of magic and Thelema has been uh, for about 20 years now. I've been practicing magic for about 20 years, more than 20 years.
In the course of that, and especially in recent few years, you've been doing a lot of writing, and you've come to see that writing is the key to magical insight. In the process, I think you've also done some interesting research and speculation. Can you talk a little bit about your writing?
Yeah, for me, well, magic is experiential. So when you experience something, you need to articulate it to yourself. You need to understand it. Otherwise, it's been my experience in these in magic that if you can't understand what's happening to you psychically, then you run the risk of losing touch with the world around you. And so writing for me has been instrumental in putting things together in a way that I can understand for myself. And with that, I've studied things like psychoanalysis and psychology, philosophy, critical theory, just to obtain the skill set needed to articulate these ideas to myself so that I can stay on course.
So lately you've been writing, you selected several passages from Liber Aleph.
Yeah.
And this is kind of new. I haven't really seen you do that before, but you've been writing your own commentary, your own thoughts and ideas to that. Tell us about your experience here.
Well, Liber Aleph to me is a lot of it deals with sexual magic, and it's been my pursuit, so to say, to um, to write as much about thelemic sexual magic as possible. I find that not a lot of people write about it in an intelligible way. I believe that most of them don't really understand it, and it's up to us to to open up this information to the world, so to speak. So that's my main motivation for commenting on these verses in Liber Aleph.
I think there's a real key to gnosis in this. As we put ourselves into the world, indeed, the master of the temple, has his stars cast into the heavens when he, crosses the abyss. That is the will that he has put out into the world. His writings or his actions or whatever has affected, how people work in a certain discipline, a certain field of art, a certain field of mechanics and business and anything else that the master of the temple manages to pull off, right? Um, and it obviously it all involves, a certain insight. I wonder what you would say about that insight, what you're seeing now through all your writing that perhaps you didn't see before, or perhaps you saw a different way. What are you getting out of this right now?
Um, well, I mean, Liber Aleph was written to for Charles Stansfield Jones as Crowley's magical son, and Charles Stansfield Jones was a master of the temple. Um, but as far as the ins I mean I couldn't tell you what the insight of someone like that is, or what their insight into the universe could possibly be, or their own being in the world. I can just try to elaborate on what Crowley wrote from my own perspective, and try to try to include as much new information as possible, or perhaps not new, but just things that maybe better said than they were prior to me
Well,
writing
yeah,
them.
I think you do work and seem to be attempting to explain, complex or sophisticated or higher end ideas. Certainly, when you get to Liber Aleph, you're
Yeah,
getting the depth of Crowley's magical thinking.
yeah, and
But I
especially
I
Crowley's
think in the
philosophy.
right, I'm just saying, I think in the writing of your interpretations, you're also bringing out some of your own ideas.
Yeah, yeah, that's why I like commentaries, because they serve as a medium through which to explore these ideas and synthesize new insights.
New gnosis,
So
new gnosis.
yeah, new gnosis.
Yeah. The
And
development of new gnosis is a creative experience.
yeah, we have this gift of having this foundation built upon the work of others. And it was the same with the Neoplatonists. Proclus was prolific at writing commentaries. All of them were.
Yeah.
They were commenting on their teachers and the teachers before those. And
And
so
and they also then produced their own.
Yeah,
They establish their knowledge of what has been, and they take it to the next step, one level further.
exactly. And they wouldn't have been able to do that if it wasn't for the foundation built by their predecessors. And
Well,
it is that foundation that served to elevate them to the heights that they were at. And you know, they expounded the tradition. They didn't just repeat or regurgitate what was already said before them and taught before them. And that is, like you say, that's new gnosis, that we stay within the tradition and just lend our own insights to it so that we build this.
well, of course, today too, with modern science, our metaphysics has to change because the physics have changed, and so modern Gnosticism really doesn't entail. How would you say it? It doesn't entail, of course, the war against good and evil. It doesn't entertain any belief structure, and it recognizes a far more sophisticated universe. When you get to the quantum fields and we get to thought and the ontology of the soul.
Yeah, yeah, that's what they're talking about now. And writing this latest essay I have on the on the unconsciousness as loops being consciousness or ether being consciousness, that which we draw inspiration from, where thoughts arise from, um, ties into modern philosophic and scientific conversations about consciousness. So yeah, we are. It's either science is catching up with the esoteric tradition, or the esoteric tradition is catching up with science. But
Yeah.
at least we're joining hands again, and we're not
Yes.
sitting on opposite sides of the fence.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. I think there is a reunion going on between science and religion, and uh, there's a lot of confusion out there right now, uh, especially with the New Age influence that's like pseudo theosophical, and that confusion that they add into the mix. Uh, they have no conscious view of the scientific vision. They don't
No,
see the universe in its
they're not.
astrodynamic.
They don't
You know.
seem very analytically minded. It's just they believe in fairy tales and stuff, you know,
Yeah,
beautiful concepts of universal oneness and nonsense like that, without actually looking into the experience and looking into these ideas and trying to figure out, now what do they really mean? I mean, everybody has their own experience. Experiences of the same things. We can't all articulate the same experience in the same way. And to just repeat what has been said before us without elucidating it for ourselves through articulation is a waste of time. And that's what these people are doing. They're just literally holding on to these sentiments that were given to them by things like the Bhagavad Gita, or whatever, the Vedantic tradition, which has nothing to do with the world today and how we as individuals see ourselves in the universe.
yeah. I think that's the big misnomer that what is the self in the universe, and there is a conservative reaction against what is new and emergent. I
Mm.
think there's much in modern Gnosticism that's acceptable that would appall even other so-called Gnostics who just have turned all the people of their myth into actual gods and powers and what have you.
Yeah, I agree. And also their attraction to Eastern philosophy and their rejection of Western philosophy is indicative of the same problem. They want the most obscure and the oldest philosophical ideas, instead of looking at what's given to them within the Western tradition, which is just as profound as the Eastern is.
It is.
But
It's absolutely as profound. And I wouldn't mind if somebody, I think it's perfectly fine if somebody decides, hey, they're really attracted to the Eastern tradition, intellectually.
yeah,
They bring themselves to spiritual realization through that.
absolutely.
Rah,
But
rah,
then
go,
they,
go. I say that's great. But
yeah,
I think Theosophy twisted a lot of what it got from the East, and it's developed into a New Age menace.
yeah.
You
I
know,
mean, with Leadbeater and Besant as being Christian, they changed into this um, moralist school of thought, which is nonsense. World peace and all this shit that you hear people talking about within theosophic forums. It's all hippie nonsense.
and one
That
of
has
them is
nothing to do with
one of the
reality.
lineages, a strong lineage, Aveline. He's pro-Trump, and he's got all this politics going on inside of it, and yet he says remain apolitical, and he's the Democrats are dummies, and I'm like, this is not a Gnostic leader of any sort, and certainly not even a good theosophical leader, and yet he claims a major school,
Yeah,
existing today, in at least online.
yeah. They irritate the hell out of me. I can't stand them. It's new age nonsense.
Yeah. And so it's difficult to get around it. And we certainly borrow much from the East. We still work with concepts, like karma and transcendental and all those things. We still see that higher world, but we define it much differently. And the myth engages our Western mind when it's set up, but we're in this in between time. The old myths are dying, and the new myths haven't been established yet, or they're established and growing. Which one, eventually comes to the top. Remains for maybe even a few hundred years to transpire, right? We still have 600 years to the beginning of the age of Aquarius, and a lot of people don't know that. So
Yeah, I
we're
think we're moving into what Nietzsche talked about in the birth of tragedy, the Dionysian era. I think the whole world is moving into that sensual era,
so you're calling it,
which is devoid
a
of.
self-aggrandizing, egoistic, pleasure-seeking kind of mentality.
Yeah, but there's still that substrate of spirituality present, although it's expressed in a very strange way. Because I think people humanity is very disparate.
I think the Dionysian formula is built into society. It comes through the Christian ritual, and it comes through the Christian myth. The names are changed to protect the Christians, of course. And there is, having that spiritual descent of grace, that moment of grace, that is supposed to happen. Um, I think that these corollaries, bring they corrupt the Dionysian formula because in the Dionysian formula you're taking you're imbibing to overcome the self and get a vision.
Yeah.
In the modern formula you're imbibing for the sake of imbibing. It has all these unconscious motives that people don't even think about.
Yeah.
you know so the importance of the unconscious and understanding that, and individually, each of us, don't you think that that raises the bar as each one of us gets to a certain higher point in consciousness where we can reflect on ourselves.
I I don't know. I mean, yeah, but I think that's just happening. Like humanity's moving. We're growing up, and
Well,
as we
it has
mature,
to be happening, right? And we have no control over that or whatever, but we can see it or not see it. and we can find it in things, but it's going to move much slower than the course of our individual lives. So, I won't live to see certain things, and you won't live to see certain other things, right? Um,
I mean, like you said, when did you say the age of Horus is act or the age of Aquarius?
the age of Aquarius is 600 years hence. We're in the Aeon of Horus, which is an in-between eon,
Well,
because the
yeah.
the age of Pisces should have ended, more than 100 years ago.
So within that time period, we're still to see the if Nietzsche was correct, we're still to see if I'm reading it right, we're still to see the Dionysian age followed by the Apollonian age before the final sort of equilibration of the world. And that could take 300 years each, or
Yeah, I
probably would
mean,
have took.
I would imagine the Apollonian age to come, really is when the institutions of our society have ran through every trick, played every game, fucked up every which way, and
Yeah.
realized the only way to salvage the world with all the power that we're holding, because we could destroy this world 10 times over. Um, that there'll be an inherent natural responsibility in the world, and that's as more and more of us, step to a higher plane of being, for want of a better phrase, and
Yeah.
and that's an understanding of the self and one's own motives and ideas. Not to tell you don't do this and don't do that, and that's bad for you and that's illegal, and God forbid you there. But to say, listen to your inner self and do your own reasoning. Get through what you experience, what you know, what's practical, what's idealistic.
Yeah, and that's what makes modern Gnosticism so relevant is with this disillusionment that's occurring within the world today. The only spirituality we have to really rely on that will center us comes from within. We can only really rely on ourselves for the answers, and that's what modern Gnosticism gives us is to take responsibility and to not look outside at institutions like Christianity for
But
answers.
even then, once you start looking in, what are you going to find? And you mentioned the word inspiration before. Right now, you've been finding inspiration in your writings in Liber Aleph. Okay, you came across it, you got inspired, you developed your ideas. You've done that with other texts. You've gone into Liber 7 and 65 and Liber Al. You've gone into Hermetic thought in a lot of different ways, and we've seen as you've been inspired for this, then inspired for that. We see a constant reaching, you going on for the next thing and the next thing.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah,
um, that's rumination. That's getting into the world of ideas. And that is the higher plane, where symbols become more real as you study them and you make them more part of your life. And you draw them and redraw them, and you find them here and you find them there. And they always cause you to, pause and stop. You imagine the points of, whatever particular star. You imagine platonic solids or, geometric shapes. Um, the alignment of planets and, where they are in the sky, and all of this then starts to speak to you.
yeah, yeah. The world of mythology as well. I have found myself looking at the world through like a mythical lens, where experiences are are often attributed to mythic stories or
Um, yeah, but
mythological stories.
how do those stories develop? They're the contents of our mind. They're the contents of our unconscious. That which we can't see. I still like subconscious better than unconscious, but got to
Yeah,
speak the same
I'm not
language.
sure if the two mean the same thing. I think unconscious includes things like the senses and instincts and things like that,
Well,
whereas the
yeah,
subconscious deals
instincts,
with things.
facts that you no longer need, good, bad, and indifferent, right? And yet, if you look at your life through all your ages, from childhood into teenage to early adult and middle age, um, the same person is always there, going through all these transformations, but there's the same inner person. You identify with each one of those bodies, and all of them are brought into this moment, you know. So they all sit in your unconscious.
Yeah, yeah, but I mean, what I'm saying is there's a conflation sometimes between subconscious and unconscious, where because even your heart beats unconsciously. So your unconscious is
Yeah,
responsible for the heart that
yeah,
beats.
the automatic
Yeah.
consciousness,
Yeah, the
you know.
automatic consciousness. And that's
Eh,
what we deal with in the AA as well, is to gain control over one's automatic consciousness, which is
Yeah,
quite the task.
it's the brain stem essentially.
Yeah.
And it's the original survival mode, pre-intellectual. And I think from that, our dreams are formed, as that, that voice is still heard, right? And it gives us our drives and our inspirations and our moves forward, and our desperations and our fears and everything else, you know. So when you learn to lay them out on the table of your conscious mind, when you're able to bring them up,
Yeah.
and shape them, and make yourself into a better self, a more knowledgeable self.
Yeah. Then you're creating your soul consciously, where you're
Yeah.
not subject to these elements controlling you, but you gain control over them.
It's wonderful. I think we should close on that. You've created, you're creating a soul. In other words, whatever elements that you've inherited by being born, you congeal all those elements to create a soul. You're not just given the soul.
Yeah.
The soul becomes established when you're able to use it. And you got to get into the world of ideas and symbols, and you got to build your body of light, because that is the soul, right? So the focus on that then is however you might do it. And with that, I think we've gone far enough. If we open up now, we'll have to keep continuing. So, uh, hey, Roland, thanks for a great discussion. We
Thank you
we
for
can put a
having me, Paul.
Facebook link, or link to anything that you have, in a blog or whatever. We can put those links up with our donation link, when we post this on our
Okay.
terrible evil uh, website host. But we'll get it up there, and we'll look forward to obviously continuing our relationship with you. So, Roland, thanks for helping me out here and getting me through this. I really, really
It's a
appreciate
pleasure.
it. And take care,
Thank
and
you.
be well.
You too. Thank you, Paul. Bye-bye.
93.
93.